We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Scott Krone of Coda Management Group and One Stop Self Storage. And more importantly, we're going to talk about his hat. That is the most important thing we're going to discuss today. To heck with all the real estate, all of the capital raising. We want to hear about the Toledo Mud Hen. So, Scott, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show, Casey. I appreciate it. Thanks for
Absolutely.
pointing out my head as well. We like to give shout outs to our neighbors, and we have our facility in Toledo, One Stop Self Storage Toledo, and they're just a couple blocks from the Mud Hen. So as they're embarking on their season, we'd like to wish them the best.
Awesome, man. Yeah, we're the smaller schools have really of the late have kind of came on. I mean, there's tons. I went to a little college called Murray State University, which is about 45 minutes from where I sit right now, and for the longest time nobody heard of it until Ja Morant showed up, and then all of a sudden now we're like Murray State is the thing or whatever, So or a lot of people know about it. But anyway, so Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into where you are now.
Well, I went to an undergraduate school for liberal arts to play soccer, and then eventually play football there as well. And wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until my senior year when my parents showed up and said, on Parents Weekend, what are you going to do next year? And we had a family business of die castings, and I thought I'd be going into the family business. And they told me that the business was going to be sold. And I was fourth generation, so that totally rocked my world. And I had to pivot and figured out what we're going to do next. And they suggested I pursue architecture, which I had done in high school. I was fortunate enough to go to a high school large enough that had multiple architectural classes, and I enjoyed it. And so immediately after graduating from college, I was immediately enrolled in a master's program for architecture, and that's how I got involved in real estate. And I was fortunate enough to have two different mentors who one helped me understand the multifamily side, and then the other one helped me understand how to take a business and grow it, just beyond a small city type business
Sure.
into a company that's across the country.
Man, that's great. And it's funny how the architecture world led you into real estate, or the because architecture is one of those things that I guess a lot of us kind of forget. You know what I'm saying? Like we we all kind of take for granted that things are just kind of there, really, I guess, when you start into these things. But then the fact that there is an architectural, which an architect almost, do you have to have some type of maybe like a little bit of engineering to go along with that?
Absolutely. The way I describe the architecture is, as you're pointing out, that if it's done well, you don't realize uh, the assumptions that go into it. And when it's done really well, obviously it moves you. It can make you really appreciate a building or a space. But if it's done poorly, you certainly know it right away.
Yeah, and one thing, my wife and I made a trip to Italy about I guess it's been about 3 months ago now, and one thing like Michelangelo and the architecture, like he wasn't necessarily a full on architect, but it kind of all of that stuff was so intriguing from a design standpoint. And the other part of that is I didn't realize this, but I actually went to a little hole in the wall bar, which is my favorite thing to do in the States, and even more my favorite thing to do overseas. And when I was sitting in there, I was the guy next to me. We just struck up a conversation, and come to find out, he was a teacher doing teaching a semester abroad in Italy and he was an architecture teacher, and I guess that's almost a requirement for a lot of architectural programs is that they do a semester in Rome to see, and maybe it's historical architecture, I don't know, but either way, he was there teaching an architectural course and for a semester abroad, simply because I think some of those things were so well designed, and like obviously they were well designed. They've been there for what, how many thousands of years or whatever, hundreds of years or whatever it is. So it was very intriguing to me.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the timelessness that I was talking about in terms of you being able to appreciate something done really well. And that's all, it's all part of the understanding of proportions and how things go together and the relationship between those things.
Mhm.
And so, that's what's allowed me to carry those ideas into development because my first mentor was also a real estate developer, an architect, and a builder. So I got to see the whole spectrum of the process. And that's what an architect is. The definition of architect is master builder. And so that's what I enjoy. That's what I've taken away from it, so that apply it towards our business.
Awesome, man. That's great. So on the development side, what types of developments have you done? Have you done anything like completely ground up?
Oh, absolutely. My master's thesis, which we ended up building, was a 400 unit condominium, townhome, and single family development over $100 million. And then I was running two other multifamily developments from the ground up. And then when I started Coda, my own business, we began in single family. Then we got into multifamily. We've done churches, we've done mixed use, and now we've sold off our multifamily portfolio, and we're focusing on self storage.
Um, wow. So I mean, that's great that your master's thesis was centered around basically what we do, what myself and my listeners, capital raisers and real estate syndicators and so on, that could potentially have been part of putting the whole deal together, like that's the whole deal. Like you had the architecture stance of it, you had I mean, $100 million, I mean, that's no joke to try to figure out how to get your hands on to get something like that done. And not to mention, now where was that at?
That was in Deerfield, Illinois. So it was the old Sara Lee factory. It was on
Hmm.
50 acres, and the original concept was over 1,000 condominiums. And through the municipal process, they knocked it down to 400. So it was actually 316 condos, 64 townhomes, and 16 single family homes. So that was how much the project changed from when it was first submitted to when it actually got developed.
Was that due to retention needs or something like that?
They were concerned about density and impacting the schools, and so they look at traffic, they look at density, they look at school impact, park district impact, all those things.
Wow. And that's like, again, the architect is kind of like the master of all of those things, because especially if you're the lead on a deal like that, you have to take into account all of that stuff. I mean, everything from not just the design and the build and so on, but the whole nine yards, really. So tell us a little bit about what you got going on right now, and what types of projects you've been involved with here just lately.
Well, like I said, back in 2013, we developed our first self storage facility that was here in Chicago, and that's where I had a client that wanted me to find him a distressed self storage, and we couldn't do it. And I always told him like the real money is in development, where you can take a property and change the valuation of it and get the cap performance on that by increasing the income. And so we bought a facility, a 90,000 square foot warehouse. We converted it and then flipped it. And then that's where we began on self storage. And then around 2017, 2018, I sold off the multifamily, and we've been developing self storage. So we're in Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Virginia right now, and in Maine, Ellsworth, Maine.
Awesome. So the conversion that you did, I'd like to hear a little more about that, because I think that with the amount of folks in the self storage space right now, I think there's a lot of confusion of what exactly like repurposing and how that looks, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily see an empty building as a blank slate, more much like probably yourself, or even I can to a certain degree. But can you walk us kind of through how that went down and what it looked like?
Absolutely. So we're looking for underperforming commercial buildings typically between 80 and 110,000 square feet. And the more regular they are, the better. If they're on angles or circles, those sorts of things, then it makes it harder to lay out lockers. And so we also like to buy them below replacement cost. So what that means is, for instance, the one we bought in Dayton, Ohio, we 90,000 square feet. We bought it for $1 million. I can't build that building for $1 million, but we could build it, then throw in a couple $1 million of renovation, and then we're still 60% below our cost basis compared to new construction, single or self storage. And so we get a competitive advantage in our portfolio because of the fact that we've taken this building that we bought below replacement cost, renovated it, and then able to lease it up, and then we'll eventually flip it.
What did the so if you have like, okay, I know around here we have a lot of buildings that are 48,000 square feet, like just a couple bay doors, an entrance, like a spec building, if you will. What How does that happen? Like, do you go in, just put partitions in? Is it inside storage? Is it outside? I mean, how do you convert something that's an open span building to self storage?
That's exactly what we do. So typically, we have a place where they can drive a car into the building or have a loading dock, and then we go in and typically we're installing a new roof, we're all new mechanicals, all new electrical, fire suppression. If it's vertical, then we put in elevators to make sure that the elevators are good, and then we go in and put 8 foot high lockers, and they have chicken wire over the top, so the lighting, the heating, and the fire suppression can put out any fires or control the space in terms of temperature or lighting. And so,
So it becomes climate control, basically.
Class A climate controlled self storage, yes.
And
So
it's
people
just,
literally drive into the building, the garage door comes down, they unload their car, they wheel it to their locker, and then they drive out.
wow. I mean, okay, so and you're doing this, so let's compare here. What is the savings of using an old building versus constructing something new similar to what you're talking about? If you were to be able to go like multi-level in something new, wouldn't obviously that would make more sense, but multi-level will make more sense to a certain degree. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out like this cost savings. But I assume you're probably getting potentially more ground with the building as well to be able to expand unclimate controlled areas and so on.
Well, not necessarily. So our Milwaukee, our Chicago, Toledo, we have a little bit of space, but Dayton, they were all lot to lot. Those buildings, there wasn't any space to expand horizontally. So we had to do exactly within the footprint that we had. We didn't expand any of those building footprints. Even our Louisville, Kentucky one, we're not expanding that footprint. These are all interior conversions.
And
And
there's
so,
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, what I was going to say is that within that model, you're asking how do we do it? How does it compare? A new self storage Class A facility could run $12 million, and we're able to do it below $10 million. So typically, we're aiming for around between $6 and $8 million our total cost basis.
Wow, that's unreal, and that's. I mean, especially if you're turning around and putting that into, and I'm assuming all these places are kind of like self-serve, like people can just slide a card or put a code in or something, and the door comes up. You go in, put the
They have
code in,
that
door goes.
capability, but in the larger ones, we also do have a sales staff there.
Wow, 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 wow. Now, one other question that's burning in my mind. I'm not sure if the listeners have thought this far into this deal, but one, and again, the only thing I have to compare this model to is what I've seen here locally and in Tennessee and in the Nashville area. Okay, so you're gonna this may be something that doesn't matter, and you may have other ways around this, but I know the conversion of some buildings in our area or Nashville or Clarksville or anything around here, the thought process that immediately enters my head is okay, that's great. Most of those are in industrial areas though. And again, the first thing I guess I'm curious about is zoning. Number two, the best place to sell self storage in my mind is closer to residential areas. Now, that could be completely a green question. I mean, that could be something that maybe you're like, no, man, we don't ever have that. And that's cool. I just am curious.
No, those are great questions. So the first part was zoning, and that's a great question. That's one of the things we evaluate, that we take into consideration when we're looking at a property. And like Milwaukee was zoned for storage, but then Milwaukee changed the definition between storage and self-storage. And so we had to rezone the property after we bought it to self-storage.
Okay.
We bought one in northern Illinois near Lake Forest, and the municipality told us to write the zoning the way that we wanted it. So that was the first time I've actually written a zoning code. And then the other facilities like Toledo and Dayton, they were zoned for storage, and they're in the heart of downtown. Our Toledo one is like I said, 3 blocks from the Toledo Mud Hens, the AAA baseball team, and then the one in Dayton is the Dayton Dragons field is a couple blocks away, and there's over 1,000 new rental units right there. So as the cityscapes are changing and more people are moving back downtown in terms of getting smaller, more downsizing their homes, their self-storage is a viable option. But on top of that, about 50% of our customers are businesses as opposed to residential.
Yeah. Okay. That's cool. Does any of this end up being a mixed use of any kind, like any type of industrial storage, bigger areas or anything like that?
We have not done that. That would be more into logistics and cold storage, or massive ground transportation, and they have entirely different requirements. They have higher beams, higher loading docks, higher driving aisles, so they can get the forklifts in and out.
Awesome, man. That's and so this is, you all are strictly in self storage space right now, correct?
From an investment point of view, yes. All of our investments are self storage.
Awesome. And that's a really highly competitive space right now too. How are you kind of, how are you able to, are you competing on any new stuff? Like when I'm not talking about conversions, but like where you go in, you buy land and then build from there.
We are. We're in the zoning process for one in Michigan. So we've rezoned it commercial, but then we have to get a special use for self storage. And then, but in each of these situations, what we're trying to do is, our market is 3 to 5 miles from that location of that property. And so when you say there's lots of competition for self storage, there is. But then if you look at a city, but we can't look at the overall entire city. We have to look at 3 to 5 miles, because that's the most someone's willing to drive, or out in the country, maybe 20 minutes. So that's the demographics of what we're looking for is within that small radius.
From the real estate broker standpoint, I had a broker in Eastern Kentucky reach out to me about some self-storage buildings he had for sale. And looking them up on the map, they were exactly that. They were in like the middle of nowhere. And I was like, and I just couldn't get past the objection in my mind of saying, how in the hell are these things even remotely profitable? And again, we're not talking, I could see if you had like 10 units and you were within 3 to 5 miles of say 250 or 300 people, you might be okay. But these were like 75 and 80 unit complexes, and they were literally in the middle of nowhere. And I just couldn't understand that. So one thing I know has really been popular here lately with the self-storage business is this whole self-service industry that really has, I guess, for all intents and purposes, made self-storage pretty much passive in a lot of cases. Are you all moving in that direction? And like you said, some of the bigger complexes, I guess you have a sales staff there available, but then also with the automation of it, how is that going to help or hurt the sales side of like additional items? Like I know they sell locks, they sell moving blankets, they sell dollies, they sell or rent that stuff as well. So what does all of that look like?
The biggest thing we sell is insurance. So everybody has to have insurance, and that's common throughout the industry.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cashflow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
But we are moving to a model. The pandemic forced it. Like everything else in life, it had left a thumbprint on our lives, and so we do have the capability of leasing up a unit 100% remote. Our one in Michigan, and the one we're building in Michigan, neither one of them will have a sales office. They'll be 100% remote operated. Our one in Ellsworth, Maine, is 100% remote operated. But all the other ones, because they're bigger and because they have restrooms and those sorts of things, we have a staff. One on average, one person on busy days, 2 people there to manage it. But people can come in, do their code, and do all the rental all on and online. And that was one. Obviously during COVID, we opened up our first one in Chicago the week before the governor shut down the state. And when I read the proclamation, it said we were considered essential.
Yeah.
And so we opened up, and our marketing was, we guarantee you your locker won't be within 6 feet of another locker, because we were 100% empty. So anybody who came in, we could make sure that they were isolated.
Yeah.
And so we were able to lease up even during the pandemic.
Wow, that's great. And then, so the biggest thing you hit on something there that I think the listeners probably picked up on too is the biggest thing you sell is insurance. I'd like to hear a little more about that. I know you said you're required to have insurance, but so I'm assuming that that's like a renter's policy, and then I'm assuming that you guys probably have something there that says, oh, but you don't have to go to your insurance company if you don't want to. We can give you this. Is that how that works?
They can bring a proof of renter's insurance. It is like renter's insurance. It's in case, any of the things get damaged because of, there's a storm and it rips off the roof, and, we don't want their,
Sure.
protect their own liability on their goods, because we don't know what's in them, right? We're not taking an inventory what's in their boxes and things along those lines. But so I mean, the renter's insurance is a percentage of how big the unit is. But we offer it. But if they bring a certificate showing that they have renter's insurance, we will accept that as well.
What is the profitability of that? Is that profitable to the company, or is that something you just pass along to the tenant?
It's profitable to us, but in terms of our overall margin, I mean, let's say the locker rentals are 95%, insurance is 3%, and the other goods combined are 2%.
Okay, so not just a mad, but a decent little passive income, I guess. As long as the insurance is paid, then you're going to get a certain percentage of that every month. So, wow.
In our larger facilities, our gross potential revenue is over $1 million. So if you're looking at 5% of $1 million, that's a nice chunk of change.
So what does that renter? So if somebody comes in, like, let's say, I know that my wife and I look at our storage unit like a tax almost. I mean, it's like, I'm just like, we've literally been paying $75. And listen, I know my investors.
We love people like you
are listening. Yeah, I know my investors are listening to this, being like, man, I can't believe that guy's got what? He's got my money. But anyway, my wife and I have a storage unit. I don't even know how big it is, 12 by 12 or 12 by 20 or something, whatever. It's too big. And $75 a month, right? And there's literally, like, I'm going to say at the highest potential. And I'm shooting high here. I'm shooting way over the mountain. There's $1,000 worth of stuff in this damn storage unit. And we've been paying $75 a month for no telling how damn long, because it's just there. And I'm like, gosh dang, it's the weekend. It's too hot. It's too cold. I don't feel like going to do it. The kids got baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, whatever it is. And so we just continue to pay the $75 a month for this $1,000 worth to store this $1,000 worth of goods. And I say all of that to ask the question, okay, our rental is $75 a month. How much would insurance be on top of that from like, is it $10 a month or something like that?
Yeah, it'd be less than $10 a month.
Okay. I just, again, and
it wasn't. How long have you been paying $75?
Longer than I care to admit.
Well, that's the first thing that operator is doing wrong, is not raising rents in that amount of time. And that's the
Ah,
type of facility where we come in and buy that, and then we get it back up to market rent, and we get the valuation to be improved.
well, that's what I thought there has to be a breaking point somewhere, because if they called me and they were like, "Hey man, we're going from $75 a month to $85 a month," I'd be like, "All right, I'm just as unlikely to come clean out my unit today as I was when it was 75 a month." I mean, so right, fine. And then 3 months goes by and they call me and they're like, "Hey man, we're going for $95 a month." I'd be like, "All right, I'm just as less likely to come." Now, obviously there would be a breaking point where I'd be like, "All right, this has gotten out of control. We're going to get our we're going to get our stuff out." Okay. Now, and I guess my question was, yeah, how do you figure where that breaking point is in order to make sure that you don't run off? Because there would be a certain point where I would be like, "Okay, this is out of control. I'm going to get our stuff." And I would just make it happen. And what guessing is from an ownership standpoint, you wouldn't want to push people that far. So maybe you would draw that increase out longer, or how do you determine where that is? That
Well,
break.
we can study the market. We can get market rental rates at a drop of a bucket. It's very easy for us to get that. We have software that does it. Plus, we can cold call. We know how to go about it.
Well,
But
my
to answer
thing
your,
is though is I would be going from 75 a month to zero, because
right?
I would go to my garage. So I guess that's what I'm getting at is yeah, you can study but I would not be moving my stuff from one facility to another. It,
No, I get it. But let's say the other facilities in the market are at 100 and you're at 75. What people do is when they get the market rental rate increase, then they start calling around to see what the other market is. And if we're going from 75 to 95, everyone will stay, even though it's a $20 increase. There might be a few people that would leave because of it, but we know that sweet spot of how where the market is. But now let's say that the market's not there.
you're talking about
We're part of this,
the garage guys like myself, the ones that would leave,
right?
and it would only be a few.
Right. So then I'm part of a mastermind of self storage operators, and we brought in one of the very largest self storage operator CEOs and founders, and he refers to his customers as survivors. I was like, holy cow, no, that's not a very customer friendly term.
Yeah,
And he
but
goes, no,
there's
they're
a reason all
survivors.
of us have gone and gotten a storage building. You know what I'm saying? We're
Exactly.
survivors. We're survivors of divorces. We're survivors of bankruptcies. We're survivors of whatever. I mean, deaths and all kinds of stuff.
Right. Well, I'll get into how we look at it, but in his mind, they're constantly raising prices, and if people aren't moving out, then they haven't raised them enough. And so when he says survivors, is because he wants turnover. A lot of self storage operators want longevity, but he wants turnovers to know that where he's hitting that sweet spot in terms of that price point. For us, we view ours as clients and how we can assist people because ultimately, as you pointed out, people are dealing with change in their life, and it's a difficult change. And so that's why we refer to ours as clients because we're trying to help solve a problem that they're experiencing.
Yeah, and so I guess from somebody and again, I consider myself probably more knowledgeable about self storage than the average person, but definitely not to the level which you all have. So, because self storage is part of our fund, we kind of tend to let the operators give us the idea of how they're maximizing our profits, I guess, if you will. Now, so basically, you just pretty much broke down the two types of self storage owners. And in my mind, I'm also envisioning what's going on here locally in the self storage business, because there's one operator basically in town that has probably, I'm going to say, 70% of the business. And we're a small town. We're not, and he just keeps building, like just keeps building and building and building and building and building and building and building. And so I guess what you just broke down was kind of the two types of owners, like the person that wants longevity and the person that wants turnover. And I guess I'm assuming that you can be that person. You can be either one of those people. Like, for instance, you could be either one of those people, but it would strongly depend on what the market looked like that you were entering. Because if you came to our market and started chasing tenants off, people would be like, it would immediately spread through town and it spread through town in like 2 weeks. This guy's going up a bunch of money. We're moving out. Go get your stuff. And I feel like it would really massively hurt their business. But at the same time, they've kept their rents a little bit lower where they're going for the longevity of saying, hey, every month I can submit that ACH paper and I'm going to get a massive draw from all these people's bank accounts at one time every month, and I don't have to worry about it.
Those are the two different scenarios. The buildings that we bought in Jackson, Michigan, the rental rates were 30% below market. He hadn't raised rents in 10 years.
Unbelievable.
So that's where we began pushing the rates after a month. And yeah, we projected that we have people that moved out, but even with the people moving out, our rental income is higher than what he had without it.
Wow. Now, is there a contractual spot to this where maybe you can't go up on everybody all at one time because they signed some type of and obviously that's done in your due diligence to figure out how many contracts have been signed, how long, what's the longest, what's the shortest time left, and so on, I guess, right?
Most of them are month to month.
Okay.
So if someone comes in and says, I want to prepay for a year, then obviously we can't raise the rent if they've already paid for that year.
Oh, so do you think that most people don't, most self-storage facilities don't make you sign an agreement that says, hey, I'm going to stay here for a certain amount of time? It's just month to month.
It's month to month unless, for instance, when we offer a month free, people always assume it's first month free. And then, but we can't offer the first month free and then the person moves out the second month, right?
Right.
So, in those situations, we're asking for a 6 month or 9 month or 12-month contract.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that, of course, I guess would depend on the marketing and the nature of whatever market it is you're in. So anyway, well, Scott, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving us at least a glimpse into what you've got going on. And the next segment here, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are questions we ask everybody that comes on the show. And then I'd like for you to be thinking of the best way for our guests or listeners to contact you if they've heard something they want to that resonated with them, or maybe they want to learn more about self-storage, or maybe they're interested in the same mastermind you're in, or whatever. So be thinking about how they can get in touch with you. But the first question I want to ask you is, what is the best book that you have either recently read or are currently reading?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I have it right here. The best book that I just recently read is Coming Home to Your True Self. It is by Albert Haas. And it is I'm doing this 2-year program on leadership. And for me, it is the book that has resonated the most during that period, that 2-year period of time. Awesome. Another good one is The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Krone, Krohn. So no royalties, no relationships. But that's also
different Krone, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's Krone or Krone. I've heard people pronounce it both ways, but those are 2 really good books that I've read recently.
Awesome, man. And that's definitely, and you mentioned leadership, and that's one thing that all of us in this industry come into with the hopes of being a leader. But we often forget that leadership needs to be trained every once in a while to ensure that your focus is staying and everything is staying in front of you, and that you're not veering off, and because when you veer off, the people who are behind you get veered off too, and then everybody gets pissed off, right? So you need to stay focused and keep moving forward. So the second question that I want to ask you is what is a dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of those things. One was I got to play in Wayne Gretzky's fantasy camp. So I got to play hockey against the greatest player ever.
Yep.
But my college roommate and I always, when we graduated from college, we decided we'd try to do one new thing a year. And so that has led me to climb Kilimanjaro or backpack in Denali, ocean sea kayak in Alaska. But it could be as simple as like driving an Indy car. I signed up for that for one day. And so when we had our 25th wedding anniversary, and my wife turned 50, I figured I better do something good, or else I'd be on the hook for a long time.
Yep.
So we went into we rented this little. Well, we didn't rent the island, but we were the only ones on the island in Indonesia. It was like a Gilligan's Island type island with the huts and all that. And then we got to visit our friends that were in Singapore. So we did a 2-week vacation over Christmas doing that.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and that's a good time I love those Christmas vacations. I don't know, a lot of people maybe like to sit around the house the holidays, but man, that getting out, because it just seems like the world is a different place during that little bit of time. So anyway, well, all right, Scott. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. And I guess this is where you can go ahead and let the listeners know how they can reach out to you. What's the best way to get in touch with you, find out more about any of your companies or any of your self-storage deals or whatever they'd like to talk to you about? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I appreciate it, Casey. Well, first of all, if anyone does call in or emails us and references this show, then we will send them 2 things. We'll send them one, a feasibility study that explains why we chose that market. And it really breaks down the national market, but also that 3 to 5 mile radius. And so we will give them that plus the self-storage deal analyzer. So when they see something, they want to know if it's a good deal or a bad deal, they can plug in the assumptions and we'll do all the calculations for them. Awesome. And so they can reach out to us at info@coda, CODAMG.com. That's info@CODAMG.com. And you can also see our products at onestopselfstorage.com.
Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much again. And listeners, thank you for tuning in today. And if you haven't already, please head down and hit the subscribe button. And as always, hit it with your finger, your elbow, your toe, your nose, your ear, your eye, whatever it takes. Hit that subscribe button. And please, if you haven't, leave us a 5-star review and also write a review so that folks know what they can expect when they listen to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. Scott, thank you again. And listeners, I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
Cash Flow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.